A little bit of noise at least. Yeah.
Perfect.
How
I
many
had-
did you get, Renee?
I had 30 children in my place. I had 4 vehicles come in and they had 14 kids. So it was like, oh my gosh.
I have an interesting question. Who's had the most trick-or-treaters ever? I think one year here we had 425.
Oh my goodness.
I can only go about 350 at one time, Heidi.
Where do you live?
I live in Rocky Mountain House in Creekside.
Wow.
For people who are from Rocky.
So when you had 350, it was while you were in Rocky as well?
Me?
Yeah.
I didn't have 350. I had 425.
And that was in Rocky?
Mm-hmm.
So what do you attribute that to, that one time being so many?
I don't know. When we just find that when our subdivision was, we only had one road going in and one road going out. It was like parents would drop kids off at the front and then they'd go through it all and then they'd pick them up at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we are good again here.
Thanks, Greg.
Guaranteed for 10 minutes or 10,000 miles, Greg? Whatever comes first.
Whichever.
Okay. All right. I think we're ready to go then. Joel, you got the first straw, so please.
Thank you. I'll go for the 10 minutes, not the 10,000 miles.
Okay, very good.
Dear superintendents and board of Wild Rose School Division, thank you for taking time to listen to us tonight. I represent a group of Wild Rose parents and staff who believe the COVID vaccine ought to be a matter of personal choice rather than a requirement. I'll cover 4 areas. 3 reasons why a mandatory vaccine is not necessary for Wild Rose. Second, why a mandatory vaccine is in conflict with Wild Rose Policy 20 and the Canadian Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms. Third, why Wild Rose should not require the vaccine because of the unknown long-term effects. And fourth, the risk to Wild Rose if vaccines are mandated. But first, the 3 reasons we believe a mandatory vaccine is not necessary. First off, vaccine protection soon decreases. The effectiveness of the current vaccines declines in a matter of months. This has triggered the call for a double vaccination, and in some places, even a 3rd booster shot. Between October 15 and 29th of 2021, 35% of Ontario's positive cases were from double vaccinated people. COVID infection of vaccinated people is common. This became apparent in the summer of 2021. Israel had vaccinated over 86% of their people, but still experienced high rates of infection from July 1st to August 30th. The effectiveness of the Pfizer vaccine had dropped from 88% to 47% in just a matter of 6 months. I should point out this letter got emailed, I hope, to all of you, and my references are linked right in the document by each one, and it's full of them. So I'm not going to pause to read those references. I'm just going to refer to them. When vaccinated people become infected with COVID, they then become asymptomatic COVID spreaders without realizing it. Because they don't necessarily show symptoms, they're more likely to be at school. If we hope that a fully vaccinated population will stop COVID, then we're going to be disappointed. The numbers don't support that. Natural immunity is a far better protection. And that's the second reason why it's not necessary. Natural immunity provides a better protection than the vaccines. COVID reinfection is rare. A person's immunity system has developed the antibodies to fight the actual virus, not just the spike protein that the mRNA vaccines try to stop. The CDC's own statement says reinfection is quite rare, but possible. They support the belief that natural immunity, obtained from producing one's own antibodies, is the preferred, perhaps even lifelong protection from COVID. Now, in my looking up all this, I have not been able to find any statistics on cases of COVID reinfection. No stats are posted on the Alberta website, on the Government of Canada site, nor on the CDC site. No stats on reinfection. Third reason it's not necessary, the severity of COVID in children is mild. Wildrose operates schools, not seniors' housing facilities. Children do get COVID. The Alberta infection rate for children is quite low, about 6% for 5 to 9-year-olds and 8% for youth between 10 and 19 years old. But thankfully, the children who do get COVID don't typically get as sick as older people, and rarely in the hospital, if ever. No Alberta child has died, according to Alberta statistics. It's not necessary. The second thing we'll talk about is that a mandatory vaccine is in conflict with Wildrose Policy 20 and the Canadian Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms. Wildrose Policy 20 is titled Welcoming, Caring, Respectful, and Safe Learning and Working Environments. It reads as follows. The background. The board is committed and obligated to ensuring each student enrolled in a school operated by the board and each staff member employed by the board is provided with a welcoming, caring, respectful, and safe working environment that respects diversity and fosters a sense of belonging. All individuals within the division have the right to work and learn in settings that are free from discrimination and promote equality and opportunity, dignity, and respect. Mandatory vaccines would require some people to violate their religious convictions by accepting benefits derived from lives lost to abortion. God is very clear in the Bible. Life is sacred. Killing is wrong, even life in the womb. Now consider this. COVID vaccines and many others are developed using fetal cell lines or tissue obtained from abortion. COVID vaccines and many others are tested by fetal cell lines obtained from abortion. And some vaccines are even produced using fetal cell lines obtained from abortion. While some people have no religious or moral objection to receiving a vaccine that's a byproduct of abortion, others do. Wildrose should be inclusive of people with this religious belief. In regard to religious beliefs, the Wildrose policy and Canadian Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms is quite clear. Section 1 of the policy continues, staff members employed by Wildrose and students enrolled in its schools will not be discriminated against as provided in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Alberta Human Rights Act. This includes recognition that all persons are equal in dignity, rights, and responsibilities without regard to race and religious belief. And then it continues. Policy 20 echoes the wording of the Canadian Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms and the Alberta Human Rights Act. While Wildrose might not hold these religious convictions, they must abide by the Canadian Charter and not require others to violate their religious beliefs in order to hold a job. Further, the Canadian Charter also specifically mentions the right to privacy of personal information, FOIP. Proof of personal vaccination is an infringement on a person's right to privacy. COVID danger does not warrant wholesale forfeiting of the right to privacy of information. And third, parental rights are also threatened. Would non-vaccinated parents be denied entrance to watch their children's band concert, drama production, or game? Have you heard of the 1947 Nuremberg Accord? The history behind it is Dr. Joseph Mengel's experiments during World War II. While a mandatory vaccine does not compare to Mengel's cruelty, mandating takes away the individual's power of choice, as stated in the Nuremberg Accord. Its 10 core principles have become the Western world's ethical guide for medical research. Listen to principle number 1. It says, the voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. This means that the person involved should have legal capacity to give consent, should be able to exercise free power of choice without intervention of fraud, force, deceit, duress, or coercion, and should have sufficient knowledge and comprehension of the subject matter involved as to enable him to make an enlightened decision. Canada is a signatory partner of the Nuremberg Accord. No one should be required to vaccinate against their will, according to this Nuremberg Accord. Third, Wild rose should not require the vaccine because the long-term effects are not fully known. Negative side effects of the COVID vaccine are surfacing. The CDC operates the Vaccine Adverse Effects Reporting System, called VAERS, V-A-E-R-S. As of October 8, 2021, over 800,000 reports had been submitted of an adverse effect to a coronavirus vaccine. With 217 million people vaccinated in the US at that time, that calculated to 1 in 271 people. The full extent of the adverse effects won't be fully known without long-term use. The speedy approval of these vaccines means the general population is the field test. And lastly, the risks of mandatory vaccine to wild rose. First, loss of people. There could be a significant number of people unwilling to vaccinate, seriously disrupting education. And liability. If the vaccine does cause adverse long-term effects, would wild rose want this on its conscience? Could wild rose be held liable? In conclusion, in this time of COVID, since the Alberta government is not requiring mandatory vaccination policies, the best way for wild rose to continue providing safe and caring schools, welcoming, caring, respectful, and safe environments that respect diversity and foster a sense of belonging, free from discrimination, is to use the best information available. Use our God-given common sense and good judgment in taking precautions, and let parents and individuals make their own decisions on whether or not to vaccinate. Thank you for the work you do to make education possible in Wild Rose, and may God bless you and guide your decision. Sincerely, Joel Suitsma and the people that I speak for.
Thank you, Joel. And also, just to answer your question, that your letter was forwarded to all of us, so we do have the links to your.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and also too, I should note, just interrupt your process, Joe. For those people online or on mainstreaming, just from a couple of texts I got, there was no business conducted while the volume was not turned on to the mainstreaming. Joel was the first speaker, so you're, for those on live online, you're hearing the full meeting. So having said that, trustees, anybody have any questions for clarity for Joel? Heidi.
Mr. Suitsma, I am just curious. You seem to, if we don't mandate vaccines, how do we protect our staff and students from what we are able to control, what we are able to do?
And I would suggest do what we're doing now. Masks and isolate when necessary, and recognize that as time goes on, some will get it, and as more of us get it, we will become natural herd immunity status people.
Okay.
Can I follow up?
Yes,
something?
please do.
For those within our school division that are immunocompromised, would not mandating vaccines not provide them with a welcoming, caring, and safe school environment?
And by them having the vaccine for themselves, that protects them, which
not if they're immunocompromised and are unable to get vaccinated.
Heidi, this is for clarity, please.
Okay, sorry.
Charlene?
Thank you, Daryl. Mr. Suitsma, just a question. I really appreciate your commitment to your rights and the rights of the people within your religious group and other religious groups. So as you know, the difference between the board and individuals is that we have a responsibility collectively, and individuals, parents and staff and community make those decisions for themselves. So then my question to you is, how do you propose that we also then make sure that all of the environments within Wild Rose schools are as safe, caring, respective, responsible, responsive to all of the groups of people, families, community that are in contradiction to what it is that you believe?
they can become vaccinated if they choose. And by doing so, they offer themselves protection that the vaccine offers. And we continue to do what we do now with masking and sanitizing. And understand that we're not going to totally eradicate this like we can any other flu that goes through.
Okay. Thank you. May?
Joel, I was just wanting to know on your number 3 point, long-term effects. Have that been studied? Like, I know it hasn't been all that long, but where would you come from saying that it's long-term effects?
That remains to be seen. Like, if you look on that CDC website, it's very massive. And I don't know if the long-term effects have been studied at all by anybody. That's just where they're reported.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Charlene again?
Thank you. Sorry, just to follow up to
Yep.
May's, and that was a question that was on my mind. Other than Google searches that you've been able to do, is there anyone in the group that you represent, or are you a medical expert?
In the group I represent, I'm not aware of any. They are all parents or staff that have contacted me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for a question for clarity? Okay, thank you very much, Joel. Appreciate your time and time and effort you put in this, and thank you for coming to the board today. We really do appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good meeting.
Yeah, thank you. Nicole, please.
Thanks, Daryl.
Sorry,
I hope
Nicole.
you guys can hear me okay.
Oh, sorry, Nicole.
Before
Second.
we start talking, can I just ask Dr. Mosley if this is his presentation, just to stop sharing his screen for now? It's kind of overtaking everything else on there. So you're still sharing your screen though right now, and we get the echo. Just have to stop presenting. Perfect.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Nicole, the floor is yours.
All right. Thanks, Daryl. Thanks to everyone for this opportunity to speak to you all this evening. I'd like to start by just talking about my personal experience so that you understand why the issue of either implementing mandatory vaccines or regular rapid testing is important to me personally. So I'm a teacher at Visions West Outreach School in Rocky Mountain House, and this is my 4th year at that school. After spending 12 years in a traditional classroom, I decided to try something new, and I found my calling. Teaching at an outreach school has been the absolute joy of my career, and I look forward to going to work every day. I work with the most amazing staff and students, and I really believe that we're making a difference in the lives of our kids. However, this year, I wasn't able to return to my teaching position as I had expected at the beginning of the year. This past July, after experiencing some really troubling health concerns last school year, I had to be admitted to the Foothills Hospital in Calgary, where I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. It was really shocking and alarming to learn that I had suddenly become one of those people that medical professionals referred to as immunocompromised in their regular COVID updates. And after everything that all of us have been through in the past year or 2 years now, it was really hard to process. When I was in the hospital, I was so sick that I couldn't walk on my own, and I had to spend weeks there away from my family. My husband and kids stayed here, and I was in Calgary. And there was a whiteboard in my hospital room that had details about my care. And I don't think the patients were supposed to touch it, but when I finally got enough strength to get out of bed and walk a little bit on my own, I wrote in the section labeled goals, get better, go home, teach kids, because that's what I really wanted to be able to do. So just really quickly, for anyone not familiar with an autoimmune condition, the short version is that a person's immune system basically begins attacking itself. So therefore, in order to treat these diseases, the immune system needs to be suppressed. So me personally, to achieve this, I take a high dose of steroids and a low dose of chemotherapy, which I will take for years to come. My doctors don't even want to talk about an end date right now because I haven't yet achieved remission. So as you can imagine, this means that my immune system is not strong enough to fight off viruses that other people don't have to worry about. I personally am fully vaccinated, 3 doses actually, but because my immune system is suppressed, my specialists just don't have any idea what kind of protection I would have against COVID-19, if any, because the virus is so new, and because the vaccine is so new, there's just simply not enough research to show how immunocompromised people on the types of medication that I'm on will respond to COVID. But they suspect that catching COVID would be very dangerous to me. So at this time, they've advised me not to socialize with unvaccinated friends or relatives for my safety, which is basically what the provincial guidelines are right now anyways. So with all this being said, I haven't been well enough to go back to teaching yet this school year, but I'm really hopeful, and I'm working with my doctor to plan my return to work. But I have to admit, I'm really nervous about how COVID factors into all of this. I know that some of my colleagues don't agree with mandating vaccines, and it's distressing to me that this issue has divided us. I think there's been a lot of misinformation spread, and it's really difficult for individuals to know who or what to believe. I think that it's unreasonable to expect that people can come to a consensus by doing their own research. I took classes in both qualitative and quantitative research during my Master's of Education, and I still find it nearly impossible to wade through online studies and fully understand all of the information, or even how to determine the reliability of medical studies. And I try to read a lot of studies, especially about my disorder, because I want to learn more, but it's really hard to understand what I'm reading and how good that information is. So what I've learned is that when I find new information, I bring it to my medical team for discussion, and I trust the experts. And sometimes they'll tell me the information is useful, and sometimes they'll explain why the information isn't accurate or valid. I kind of see something similar going on with people who are trying to understand more about the COVID-19 vaccines. But I think that we're really lucky to have the experts that have already done this work for us. We can look to the guidance of the National Advisory Committee on Immunizations, who've studied the safety and efficacy of the vaccines, and the Chief Medical Officer of Health and her team, who have strongly recommended that school boards mandate vaccines or regular rapid testing for their staff members. And finally, I just want to remind you that my personal experience is a representation of many immunocompromised staff and students in our schools. I have friends and colleagues that have had organ transplants, that are battling cancer, or that are dealing with diseases similar to mine. And we also know that our schools have medically fragile students in them who deserve to be protected. And we know it's impossible and unreasonable to expect the school board to eliminate COVID-19 in our schools. We only ask that the board takes all reasonable steps within their power to try to protect staff and students. In a similar way, when we have someone in a school with a peanut allergy, we ask that everyone makes the sacrifice to not bring peanut products into school to protect the vulnerable person. I think getting vaccinated or taking a test is a similar sacrifice, and it's my hope that we can do all the right things once again to ensure the safety of our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Any trustees have questions for clarity, please, from Nicole? I'm not seeing any hands up, Nicole. No, oh, great. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much for your time.
It's been excellent to hear your passion too. Thank you. Appreciate that. Hillary. There you are. You're still muted, Hillary. Your mute's still on, Hillary.
There we are.
You go.
I think I got it. Yes. Okay.
You got it.
Okay.
Okay. Your turn, Hillary, please.
Okay. So good evening, members of the board, admin staff of Wild Rose School Division, and everyone following along from home. I am Hillary McDermott. I'm a speech language pathologist assistant for the corridor, and I was just learning that's Ward 3. I'm grateful to Mr. Volkman and the board for allowing me this opportunity. We have such a capacity for keeping ourselves and others safe. We can start with healthy foods, water, multivitamins. I believe that we are very capable and that we have an awesome immune system in most cases. Then we add protective equipment and cleaning protocols, especially in the group settings. And in this way, we can all be prudent about keeping ourselves and others safe. I believe that this is acceptable, it's effective, and that it is enough. Those who choose to add 1 vaccine shot or 2, also acceptable, effective, and that it's enough. It should remain anyone's and all people's rights to their bodily integrity and to be able to make that choice. So I have an example of 2 points of view. I don't know if anyone has read the book about the Zacks in Dr. Seuss. It's about 2 characters, and they're kind of immovable in their positions, but one is going one way, one is going the other way. So how they perceive the vaccine, or you could say how they perceive this, I believe, experimental therapy. So the east-going Zacks. This person is over 18. They have a high school education followed by some post-secondary education. They respect and appreciate authority. They work, they pay their taxes, and they have a high degree of trust and loyalty. They believe peer-reviewed studies by experts. They follow mainstream media, and they accept what they hear. They have a high regard for their own health and are protective of others' health. They accept the emergency status, and they follow all health measures and restrictions. And they believe that the experts have teamed up to fast-track a safe and effective vaccine. So that sounds reasonable, rational, decent. All right, then we have our west-going Zacks. This person is over 18. They have a high school education followed by some post-secondary education. They respect and appreciate authority. They work, they pay their taxes, and they have a high degree of trust and loyalty. They believe peer-reviewed studies by experts. They follow the media. They think critically about what they are hearing. They likely follow any policies around health measures, but are not happy about it unless it makes sense and is backed by science, and sometimes science and math. They have a high regard for their own health, and they are protective of others' health as well. They accept the emergency status, but they are open to the opinion that perhaps numbers have been inflated. They believe that groups that stand to gain money or control have created a shot that is neither safe or effective. So in this scenario, both Zacks have value, they have rights, and they should be able to handle this challenge by coping in the way that they choose. Having said that, both Zacks must have mutual respect for each other and others working and learning with and near them, with the mutual goal of a safe environment to work within. So to get this therapy or not to get this therapy, this experimental therapy. So for many, it means, let's go with the east-going Zacks. Okay, it means freedom, it means health, it means travel, it means back to normal, it means an all-access pass. It means that you put mRNA in your system to create antibodies against COVID-19. It means seeing older relatives. It means going in to watch children in sports. Let's see what it means to the west-going Zacks. It means freedom. Freedom from this substance that we don't know a whole lot about going into their bodies. It means health, preserving their health. It means perhaps being under the exemption program, the restrictions exemption program, so blocking of access to non-essential services. It means staying natural. And what does this do to the body? So it means a lot of questions. What does this do to the body? Has it been proven to be safe? And what does it really do to my immune system? What are the potential adverse reactions? And now we're starting to see real adverse reactions in huge numbers. And what is the next message that they may ask this mRNA to send? As in, what is in the future shots? And are they always going to send the message of, please prevent COVID-19, or will they send other messages as well? So, I was going to refer to the Nuremberg Code, but that has already been referred to, and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So that's about having that autonomy of your body. So in aiming to understand the truth, it's a confusing world out there. So I believe we should be able to try to understand the truth for us as individuals and within our families and within the moral compass of each of us. We should be able to make a choice with no strings attached as to how to cope with this pandemic. So then I think peace and grace ask that we choose to say yes or no to these vaccines. It is fair to all concerned that no one be treated differently, pay more, interact with people less, or risk getting forced out of their work because of it. Out of their work site, I should say. I understand that a basic tenet of this board is that they are against discrimination. So a little bit on Canada's inverted system of law and why this is even in your lap to decide on. As Canadians, we're immersed in a divisive government agenda that is fracturing our communities, tearing down our culture. What you may not realize is that you are key to the plan. The source of your confusion, anger, and frustration is the inverted system of law our government is imposing on us. Normally, when the government enacts laws, government officials uphold or enforce them against individuals and corporations that are not in compliance. Under this inverted system of law, government imposes the responsibility for enforcement on you, meaning doctors, business owners, nurses, principals, teachers, board members, etc. And there is more on that, but I'm not going to get into it within this time frame.
Hillary, I'm just going to let you know you're down to your last minute. You're at the 9-minute mark.
Okay, thank you. So I believe that we can continue to work while respecting safety policies and boundaries that are already in place. I ask that the board consider maintaining the current level of response, but not to put a vaccine mandate in. And let us agree to be diverse in our thoughts and responses, and yet work together in peaceful coexistence while improving life chances for all students. Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. Board members, anybody with, excuse me, anybody for questions for clarity for Hillary? None here. Seeing none, Hillary. Thank you very much for your time and your passion in your talk. Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming to us.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Dr. Mosley, it's time for screen sharing again. Please. You're still muted, sir. There you go. There you go.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to present today and share some information. So just to introduce myself, my name is Mohammed Mosley. I'm a medical officer of health for Central Zone for Alberta Health Services. I have completed 7 years of medical school, including undergraduate studies, 4 years as a research assistant and associate, 5 years as a residency training as a public health and preventive medicine specialist. I'm an MD. I'm a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada, and I have been a practicing public health specialist for the past 5 years in Alberta, specifically in Central Alberta. My role today is to share information based on the best evidence that we have, that we know to be the best that we can obtain. To note, science is out to find the truth, to find the facts, to share those facts. When science changes what it is sharing, it's not that it was lying, it's that because it learned more. Moving forward, we might learn more about the vaccine, about the virus. My role and my colleagues' role and this organization's role is to share that information, the best information, the most reliable information, most truthful information that we believe to be truthful with the public, to make sure that we are discharging our role towards the public and our responsibilities and our duties. So with that introduction, I'm just going to move forward with my presentation. Can everyone see my my screen?
Not yet, no.
Oh.
No.
Okay. Oh. Can you see my presentation now?
Yeah, we got it now. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So, COVID-19 vaccine. Public health on record has observed historically that one of the most catastrophic events in human history was in the early 20th century, when a novel virus affected humanity. Estimated that the death toll was between 10 to 100 million people. And the reason why the death toll was high is because it was a novel virus that our immune system had not seen before. When an immune system does not recognize a new enemy, it does not have the tools, does not have the weapons to fight off that virus. That virus was the influenza virus, and it was the first time that we have on record that we had a pandemic. Subsequently, over the following decades and years, our immune systems learned how to fight off that virus. However, the virus continues to evolve, which is why we need to meet that evolution of RNA, of genetic reform, and change our vaccine to make sure that we are protecting our human fellows. Vaccination remains the most important thing we can do to fight a virus such as the COVID-19 virus, which is another novel virus. It is not the only method that we recommend or support. It is one of many tools we have in our toolbox. We are in full support of everything that can be done to protect each other, to protect ourselves, and to protect humans. Vaccines do not contain the virus itself. This is specific to the COVID-19 virus. The COVID-19 virus is a novel one. It's something that we haven't seen before. Our immune system has not observed before, has not fought before. And it does not have the tools to be able to protect us from the virus. And then when we talk about effectiveness, rates, all of these are statistics. When we look at death of a person, we see that loss of life as precious. We care, it hurts us, it affects us, and it drives us to work harder and for longer hours so that we see these numbers drop. It's easy to look at numbers and talk about 10 people dying, 20 people dying, and treating these as numbers, but these are human beings. These are brothers, sisters, fathers, mothers, grandparents. And that's why we work hard to make sure that we are sharing as much information as possible. Specifically when it comes to vaccine safety. The vaccine does not contain the virus itself. This is specific to the COVID-19 virus. It, however, teaches our immune system how to fight it off. There are certain facts about the safety of the vaccine that I want to share today, including that you cannot get COVID from the vaccine, that the facts stand that less than 0.001% of vaccines administered across Canada, across North America, across the planet have resulted in an adverse reaction. And when those adverse reactions are detected, they are recorded, and we learn from these experiences. There is a small chance of allergic reaction. Nevertheless, even that small chance, we take them very seriously to make sure that we are sharing that information with the public as we get it. Some of these reactions are listed there on the slide. And also to know that most reactions are mild and end after a day or two of receiving a dose of vaccine. We also recommend that if these reactions last longer, that the person who is experiencing these reactions gets in touch with their doctor. As I mentioned, in Canada, we have been blessed with having one of the most robust adverse events following immunization surveillance systems, or AFIS. We record every single thing that we observe or we can collect. We study them, we analyze them, and we make sure we learn from them so that we can deal with them and be better at helping people and protecting people. Some of the concerns we've had that it was developed so quickly. Is it safe? Are these severe side effects? Will it make me sick? Can I get vaccinated if I've had COVID-19? Can I get vaccinated if I have allergies? What are the ingredients in the vaccine? What if I'm pregnant or breastfeeding? All of these questions, we have tried our best, and we have obtained the best information, best facts that we've seen from the experienced people, from the expert, from the studies, and from what has been observed after administering millions of vaccines worldwide. What is expected after getting a vaccine? You can get COVID from the vaccine itself. Most reactions are mild and end after a day or two. If they last longer, we recommend that people get in touch with their doctors. There's a small chance of allergic reaction, and adverse events following immunization must be reported. After a person is vaccinated, it takes up to 2 weeks to build immunity. Second dose of the vaccine is recommended to be 4 weeks after receiving the first dose. However, everyone is still encouraged to follow public health measures. Like I said before, and I reiterate, this is not the only option that we have. This is not the only effective intervention that we have. It is the best intervention we have, and it has saved a lot of people. However, we have numerous tools in our toolbox that we recommend and support. It is possible to get COVID-like symptoms. If it happens, testing is recommended and isolation is required. As I mentioned, every life is precious, and if there's anything that can be done collectively or individually to save a life, to prevent a death, then we support that and encourage that. And with that, I will open for questions and discussions if there are any.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the presentation. Anybody have questions or clarity for Dr. Mosley? May? You're muted, May.
I'm not sure if I got this right or not. Did you say that there's different things that go into the vaccinations, or is it one? Is it just one thing that everyone gets, or are they changing the vaccine?
So when talking about the influenza vaccine that has been circulating for around 100 years on a global level, the virus continues to change, and that's why every year people have to receive the influenza vaccine. We study the change. There are different studies on the North Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere to look at what circulates in what virus circulated during the winter season. That information is shared with the other hemisphere, and then what was learned is implemented in the vaccine program, so that it prepares the immune system of that hemisphere to what is expected to be circulating in the winter before it starts. So it's the same vaccine, but it is more targeted so that it protects people more accurately and effectively.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else question for Dr. Mosley? Not seeing any hands go up, Dr. Mosley. Oh, so pardon me. Jackie, go ahead. Just remember your mic.
There it is. I have so many questions, Dr. Mosley. I'm concerned about misinformation. So could you just speak to misinformation that people hear? Like about for instance, that it's actually better to get the COVID rather than the COVID vaccine. It gives you better immunity.
Thank you for that question. And I just want to clarify, in the medical field, and which is where I come from, we believe in informed consent. We believe in people's right to make their decisions. But we also believe that it's our responsibility to give people the right information to make that informed consent. If you make a decision based on wrong information, then you will make a misinformed decision. So thank you for that question. The information out there is abundant. If you Google, you're going to find so many theories, and this is not new only or specific to COVID. This has been the case with vaccines throughout the past decades. The best information that is out there, we as a team of public health physicians, public health specialists, experts, personnel from thousands of people working together, collect the best information, most reliable information. That information is shared through the Alberta Health Services website, /COVID-19, as well as the Alberta Health website and the Ministry of Health. So I do encourage that if there's anyone who has any question, to stick to those resources, as it not only gives you the most reliable information, but it gives that information that pertains to our local epidemiology, our local situation in Alberta. I hope I answered your question.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a follow-up question?
Please, Jackie, go ahead.
Could we possibly end up seeing a lot of long-term diseases that are way in the future with COVID? Like I'm thinking about the subacute sclerosing panencephalitis that some people end up with once they've had measles or even, shingles from chickenpox. Is that a possibility?
So in medicine, there's no such thing as never or not possible. There's always a possibility. We can only share information that we have at the moment, when what we have is that the vaccines are effective, are safe, and are saving lives. The infection itself, long-term outcomes, as mentioned before, this is a novel virus. We haven't seen it before. We are doing everything in our power with whatever tools that we have to protect people and to prevent disease and death.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Jackie?
Well, since you ask, is COVID more or less risky than influenza?
Both of them are risk. So prior to COVID-19, influenza was the 7th most common cause of death in Canada. Influenza was the direct cause of death of 4,000 Canadians. Risk is, again, subjective. So if we're talking about causes of death, both influenza can lead to death and severe outcomes for those who acquire it. We don't take any of these two more serious than the other. We take any pathogen or any public health risks that can cause disease and death to an individual seriously. I don't think it's possible to compare them because both of them are dangerous infections, and that we do our very best to prevent them through public health measures, including vaccination.
Okay. And I have one more question.
By all means. Go ahead.
Would you feel extremely comfortable giving the COVID vaccine to anybody that you love?
I have received 2 doses. I have 3 children. One of them is over 12, so she has received 2 doses. My parents, my family members, everyone have strongly encouraged to get the vaccine. However, if anyone chooses not to get the vaccine, my responsibility as a person, as a loved one, and as a professional is to make sure that I am giving the best information that I can share. Nevertheless, as I mentioned before, every person is free to choose for their own. However, I just want to note that it's in these situations, we are not only choosing for our own, we are choosing for others, because if someone gets the virus, gets the infection, and passes it to another person who will subsequently gets the infection and develops severe outcome and even death, that is on us, on me, because I could have prevented that death.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else for a question for Dr. Mosley? Heidi, go ahead.
Is the mutation of coronavirus a concern with the low uptake of the vaccine?
So broadly speaking, viruses are RNA viruses and DNA viruses. RNA viruses have a genetic sequence like a body of water. It flows and changes at all times. It's not really a mutation, it's a genetic change, like water. And the same thing is another RNA virus is influenza. So it's not really a mutation that changes how the vaccine effect or the vaccine protection is developed by immune system. Based on the information that we have, the vaccines are protective against all forms that we have circulating in the populations these days. We have not seen a mutation of a new strain, and that's why you hear the word variant, not strain.
Yeah.
When you hear the word strain, it means a new virus. But when you hear a word variant, it means that genetic sequence has changed enough that it looks different, but it's still the same. It has the same backbone. And that's why the vaccines are still the best and most effective way at protecting people against all variants. I just want also to note that there's no such thing, as I mentioned, as 0% or nothing as 100%. The vaccines that we have an average of around 84% effectiveness, meaning that of 100 people who get any vaccine, full vaccination, there are 16 of them that will not develop protective levels of antibodies. That is because of genetic variation, different health condition and states. We don't know, but again, 84% protection is significant. And if there's one life that can be saved because of vaccination, I personally would encourage that. If you translate this number into what was mentioned earlier about Israel, if we have an 84% vaccination rate and 16% of no vaccination rate in a population of 100 million people, or let's say 10 million people, that means we have 1.6 million people who have received the vaccine. If everyone got the vaccine, 1.6 million people who, although received the vaccine, they will still not be protected. That's why it's empirical that we recognize, we know that we have to work together to protect each other. We are all in this together.
Thank you. And Heidi, a follow-up? Anybody else with a question for Dr. Mosley? Dr. Mosley, thank you very much. You've been very, very informative. Appreciate that. The only question I have for you, before you go, could you take your screen sharing down, please?
Absolutely.
But thank you. But we really do thank you for your time, and you have been very valuable to our debate here tonight. Thank you. Appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night. And then next we have Mr. Volkman and Mrs. Urbinski with some information or follow-up from stuff we requested from our last board meeting.
Yeah, thanks, Daryl. So the board at our October 13th meeting did request that administration bring back more information. And I'm going to just review some of the information we talked about on the 13th, but just kind of get the key points that you asked me to get for you. First of all, what we have to do is do a hazard assessment. And this comes straight from the government of Alberta and from our lawyers, encouraging us strongly to do a COVID-19 hazard assessment. And one of the first things that they ask is, are there any orders of the Chief Medical Officer of Health that are applicable? And this is where it gets a little bit tricky because we actually didn't get a Chief Medical Officer order. There are several orders. You can find them on the website. But a mandatory vaccination is not one of them. You'll see an order for masks and all kinds of other things. But what we did receive was a letter from the two ministers, the Minister of Health and the Minister of Education, and the words were strongly encourage. So they kind of came just short of a mandate. The board needs to, I guess, be in their debate, needs to think, is that significant or not, that it was not mandated? And we've heard other speakers talk about that as well. But just wanted to make sure we were clear on that. There is no medical order, but there is a letter of strong encouragement. Active cases, when we met on the 13th, I told you that we had 213 self-disclosed cases of COVID. And we had 66 the last year. All of the 2020-21 school year, we had 66 cases reported. And then in the first 6 weeks, we had 213 of this new school year. Now, in the last 3 weeks, it's actually slowed down tremendously again. And so that's the new data. In the last 3 weeks, we've had 13 student cases and 5 staff cases. And these are now being reported by Alberta Health Services. The 216 or 213 I referred to earlier in the year was when Alberta Health Services was not actually tracking these. What's interesting though, out of those 18 that we've had in the last 3 weeks, we've actually had parents still reporting. So we've heard rumor of more than 18, but Alberta Health Services has confirmed that only 18 were infectious while at school. So that's the best data I can give you on that. Student absences, when we met back on the 13th, we showed you a graph where the absences had really spiked towards the end of September. Student absences have improved a lot since then, but when we talk to our principals, they tell us that they're still higher than what they normally would be in a non-COVID school year. So even though COVID cases are down, we're still seeing a number of students either not comfortable coming to school or they're maybe sick with something other than COVID, but it's still a bit on the high side. Staff absences have also decreased. We're much better in that regard. But when we talked with our principals just recently this week and our vice principals, they told us that even though most of their staff, are now at work and they're back and healthy, they are very anxious. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of just worry. And our principals feel like our staff are just kind of on the edge, And so whether there'll be more illnesses coming or not, we don't know. But for right now, they're hanging in there. We're proud of our staff. They are doing their all. They are frontline workers in the truest sense. And they are doing a great job. But there is some concern there of fatigue and stress on them for sure. I guess one thing that I could mention though is that our principals also mentioned that they do have difficulty getting substitutes still to cover substitute teachers and casual employees when they do need them. There's an outbreak list. When we met on October 13th, I reported to you that 12 of our 17 schools were either on alert or outbreak. As of today, we're down to 1 school is on alert status. So again, more evidence that we seem to be in a good path right now for the reduction of COVID, at least currently within our schools. The severity. We know we had all those cases, 266 last year and 213 at the start of this year. What about the severity of them? This is a bit tougher for us to measure. We don't necessarily get that information. So we had our director of wellness reach out to all of our family wellness workers and our principals across the division and just find out, if anybody would know about the severity, it would be, our schools, our principals. So I can't say that this is data that's precise, but what they brought back to us was that throughout this whole time of COVID, starting back in March of 2020, we've had 21 students that required hospital intervention due to COVID and 16 staff that required hospital intervention due to COVID. We were not aware of any students or staff that ended up in the ICU during this time, and we're not aware of any student or student or staff deaths due to COVID. However, as you know, our family wellness workers work with families when it's a family member that's has passed away. So we've got 18 COVID deaths that were directly connected to either a student or a staff member. So 18 of those, but none directly of our students and our staff. Active cases in the region, you can go to the website on this one. When I reported to you on October 13th, there were 149 active cases in Brazeau County. As of today, it was down to 49. So it's reduced by quite a bit. In Clearwater County, on October 13th, I reported that there were 243 active cases of COVID-19 in Clearwater County, and that's down to 91 as of today. The anonymous survey we sent out, we didn't redo the survey, so that data is unchanged. We had about 71% of our staff respond to the survey. That's 694 staff members and 496 replied. And I'm talking substitute teachers, casual employees, everybody. And so that was, and of that 496, 78% indicated that they were double vaccinated. Then we can look at the vaccination status of our communities. And so when I reported last time, Drayton Valley was at 53.1% vaccinated. It has gotten to where it's 58.2%, and that's for 12 years old and up. Rocky Mountain House was at 56% when we last talked. They're now at 61% vaccinated, and that's for age 12 and up. If we look at just our students, the age group 12 to 19, 44.1% in Drayton Valley are fully vaccinated. That's our students, age 12 to 19. And in Rocky Mountain House, it's 44.6%. And that comes from, again, the Alberta Education website. As far as persons in our school division with health vulnerabilities, similar to what you heard Nicole Mooney talk about this evening, we have 107 students with those vulnerabilities. For staff, it's unknown to us. Our staff are not required to report those to us. Of course, with students, we're made known of those things because their programming is often impacted by those sorts of that information. And then, of course, we know that our students are in close proximity. That's something as you make your decision, you need to think about. We have students that are working together in classrooms where there could be anywhere from 15 to 30 kids or more in a class. 2 meters of distance is often not possible. We've got students also, when we look at, we need to also look at what other hazards there might be in our school division that might not exist in another setting, another work setting. And in that case, we have kids that sing in music class. We have students playing wind instruments. We have athletics where they're playing in close, tight, proximity to one another. We've got students eating together in classroom settings. We know that there are no vaccines right now for students ages 5 to 11, although we hear that they're around the corner. They should be available, in the not too distant future. And of course, we know that there's no mandating of our age 12 to 19 students for vaccines either. So we have to assume there's a number of students, in our schools that are not vaccinated. What other controls do we have? Well, they're the things you've already heard of. Students in grade 4 to 12 wear masks. That's helpful. Our elementary classes are cohorted. That's very helpful. We use hand hygiene and respiratory etiquette and increased ventilation, increased cleaning and disinfecting, and staying home when sick. So those are some of the other controls that we have. What kind of responses have we been getting from our employee groups? Well, all 3 of our employee groups, as far as their union officials or their professional organization, have told us that they agree with a mandate, provided it does not contradict their collective agreement, and also that exemptions based on human rights are acknowledged. And they said that these exemptions could include things like providing a negative rapid test. It could include an alternate assignment if that's possible, that keeps them away from others, or it could actually be as a last resort, and that's the wording they use, as a last resort, an unpaid leave of absence. We had 90 submissions on an opinion survey that we sent out to all of our staff, and the majority of those were in favor of a policy. But we've also received a number of emails. I think I've had about 20 to 30 staff emails, and one of them was actually came from 23 staff alone, just on one of those letters. You've received the same letter, and there was a kind of a follow-up document that came later with a few other names on it. And most of those are saying they don't want a vaccine policy. So I think it's only fair, and then we've received multiple emails from parents. And I'd have to say almost every one of those, and the board members, you've received a lot of them. I would say just about every single one of those are asking that we not have a mandate, a vaccine mandate policy. I think it's important that we just quickly summarize what we've heard. I think it's important that the board has taken into consideration all of this information people have taken time to send us. So typical responses from staff that would like to see us create that mandate, a vaccine mandate. We work with a vulnerable population. And this recent variant has been a little bit tougher on students than the first go round. Collective safety supersedes individual choice, especially during a public health emergency. It'll provide a greater feeling of safety for staff, students, parents, and community. There's more science supporting the benefits of vaccines versus the science against vaccines. And the benefits outweigh the risks, is what some of these folks told us. If student and staff safety is truly our top priority as a school division, then we need to walk the talk. Again, I'm just quoting things that we've received from those that support this. The vocal minority should not prevent what is being scientifically accepted and practiced across the world. This person said, I don't want to go back to shutting schools down like we had to last year. Let's do everything we can to keep them open. There's so many learning and wellness negative impacts on student learning and well-being when we shut schools down. As long as people still have a choice, some said, we still got to have a choice for those that don't want to. And they included things like a negative COVID test or unpaid leave. We especially need this in Wild Rose communities, one person said, because our overall community vaccination rates are lower than most of the province. And our active cases seem to be higher than ever. Now, remember, when they sent this to us, that was back a few weeks ago. The cases have come down a little bit, quite a bit since then. We're tired, we're anxious, we're overwhelmed due to COVID. The only way out of this pandemic is to increase vaccination rates. And then someone said, hey, follow the lead of both the federal government and the provincial government. While we said at the start of this, my presentation, that the provincial government has not mandated vaccines for school divisions, they have in fact mandated vaccination status vaccines for public service workers. And the federal government has done something similar. So this person's just saying, you're probably going to be in pretty good company in terms of feeling that you're not breaking laws and things by doing this if our federal provincial governments are doing this. And while it is true that vaccinated people still can get COVID, and yes, they still can transmit COVID, it is significantly less, and the consequences are much less severe than those that would be unvaccinated. Then here are some of the typical objections that we received. This is a personal rights issue. It's discrimination against a person. What about informed consent and body autonomy and privacy? Some talk about natural immunity versus vaccination. Why wouldn't we at least have in our policy something about natural immunity for those that have had COVID? Some told us they're not against vaccines. They said, I actually am vaccinated myself, but I'm against the removal of choice and freedoms and rights regarding something as personal and as impactful as having something injected into a person's body. Some have said, hey, an unpaid leave isn't really much of a choice. There are lots of people that would not be able to afford to take that unpaid leave. And some say that the rapid COVID test that would be required twice weekly is still medically intrusive, it's costly. And there's some confusion on that too, because they say, well, okay, so vaccinated staff, they can come into the school without needing that rapid test. And an unvaccinated person could come into the school and they need a rapid COVID test. Yet both of those individuals could be actually bringing COVID into the school building. I guess so we've heard some of that in the objections as well. All the things around, it's experimental and uncertainty. And I'm glad Dr. Mosley was able to clear some of that up. Potential adverse effects of vaccines. This one said, using the threat of loss of employment as a means to force people to be vaccinated just isn't ethical. It's not lawful and it's not ethical. Some said it's very divisive. It kind of creates an us camp versus a them camp, and that's hard in our school communities. Others said COVID has an extremely high survival rate. I think for under the age of 70, or for children, it's 99.9%. Why they say, why go to such extremes for something that has such a high survival rate? Negative impacts on mental and emotional wellness of unvaccinated staff. They truly fear. Some of them will, the ones that are doing this truly fear getting the vaccine, and that'll be hard on them if they're forced into that kind of a decision. Why would the board, some said, why would the board create a vaccine policy that's not been mandated by Alberta Health Services? In so doing, is the board assuming greater medical expertise, knowledge, or liability than Alberta Health Services or the Chief Medical Officer of Health? Is this major step needed, given that numbers are going down and we're doing all these other things? That's another point that's been made. And if the majority of Wild Rose staff are already double vaccinated, is it worth the risk and alienation to kind of force the remaining few into this, and what that might create? Staff energy and morale is already very low due to COVID-19 and all the changes. This will add to that pressure. And then all the violation of laws, FOIP, Canadian Constitution, we've heard some of that. Are we at risk of taking on lawsuits if we do that is one of the points. And then there's pointing to other jurisdictions that are already looking at removing vaccination requirements. Recently in Ontario, a member of the Liberal Party brought forward a bill that would have mandated, this is provincial, would have mandated vaccines for education and health workers, and it was actually defeated in their legislature. So both sides will point to jurisdictions of where it's happening or not happening as kind of evidence. So here's kind of what I would like to say to all of those that sent us this information. We thank you for it. You're taking part in the democratic process. Our trustees have been reading this information. We've been going through it. And we acknowledge that we are not medical experts. We are not legal experts. But there are many voices out there claiming to be those experts. And so this board has had to decide right from day one what voice they're going to listen to. And I would say right from the start, it made sense for our board to listen to Alberta Health Services. They are the ones that are in our province that are charged with keeping us safe, medically speaking, and in terms of our health. And so that's been the voice we've listened to throughout this. And as far as legal information, yeah, I mean, the board doesn't want to take on lawsuits. Yes, go ahead, Darryl.
Just before you get to the legal part, I just think it's important for the public to know that we, as you've commented, we as trustees have been receiving a lot of emails. I'm past 100 already myself.
Yeah.
And as trustees, some of them have been sent to us as a group. Some have been sent to trustees personally, but we have been sharing the personal ones amongst ourselves so that we get to see them all. And there was a 20-page booklet picked up at the schools for all of us to read through. So I think it's important people know that, we are getting all this information and we are sharing it amongst ourselves. And believe me, we're reading it all because we have conversations about it once in a while. So just want to make sure aware that their information is getting through to us and we are reading it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Darryl. And in terms of medical information, we're taking our cues from Alberta Health Services. For legal information, we've had a long history of working with two different legal firms, Brown Lee and McLennan Ross. And so we've been regularly in communication with lawyers there to get advice as well. And so we've chosen, there's, again, so many voices, we had to pick. And those are the ones we've picked. Now, when it comes to insurance, we want to also take a look at some insurance considerations. So I've asked our Associate Superintendent of Business and Finance, Emma Urbinski, just to talk a little bit about insurance.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So Wild Rose School Division is part of an insurance reciprocal with 37 rural boards called ARMIC. In regards to the vaccine mandate policy, ARMIC has been working with our broker, underwriters, to determine the impact on the reciprocal in the event any of the members, school boards, decide to not enforce the mandatory vaccination or proof of negative COVID test. So at this time, the underwriters have not indicated the effect on our premiums if a board implements or doesn't implement a vaccine mandate policy. But from a financial perspective, what our board needs to know is that there is a possibility that insurance premiums may increase for boards that do not have a policy. And just for your reference, for the 2020-21 school year, so the school year that just passed, the division paid almost $900,000 in insurance premiums.
Okay, thank you, Emma. Now, we've heard some people say, well, insurance companies, they can't force you to have a kind of a COVID protection. And I guess you're probably right, they can't, but they can decide what our premiums are based on what we have and don't have. And we can either take it or leave it. And it's not like simply going down to the local cooperative in your local town to try to get insurance for like 19 buildings and all the properties and the equipment we have. So this is a fairly big deal. However, I'll mention that there is one school division that is part of this group, the 37 school divisions. It's Wetaskiwin Regional Public Schools Division. And they have made the decision for now, their board met, and their vote for now is to not have a COVID vaccine mandate. But if you look at the wording, they said at this time. And I think that protects them, because if something happens with insurance that may change that direction, or maybe something happens with COVID rates in their community, like right now they're lower, they've left a bit of a back door open. Having said that, there are about 3 other divisions we know of that are part of the 37. There may be more, but 3 that are close to us that already have decided to have a vaccine mandate. And that is Parkland School Division, that's the Spruce Grove area, Black Gold School Division, that's that Leduc and rural area, and Star Catholic. They're kind of in that Leduc area and even into Drayton Valley. And they've all just recently announced that they will have vaccine mandates, and they're part of that insurance group as well. So we got some of each. When it comes to legal considerations, Brownlee stated that they're confident, based on current precedent, that a vaccine policy would be upheld in terms of occupational health and safety, in terms of Charter of Rights, in terms of discrimination, and human rights complaints. They claim they are unaware of any case that states that COVID-19 safety measures are an overreach, though some may exist. You gotta love the lawyers, right? They're never gonna give you the 100%. They're gonna always add as far as they know, but there may be some that exist. Now, but on the other side of that, Brownlee says that they are directly aware of cases where failures to take sufficient COVID-19 safety measures have led to a successful complaint to a labor relations board. Now, they weren't talking specifically about a vaccine mandate in that case. They just meant in general, if a school division's not, I think an example would be if we weren't doing anything, if we weren't, doing the extra cleaning, and if we weren't, having kids wear masks and the hand hygiene, that would definitely lead to a labor complaint. McLennan and Ross urged a bit more caution in moving forward and due diligence, although they have told us that they are creating policies, vaccine mandate policies for several school divisions in the province right now. But they made this statement: employers have a general obligation to provide employees with a safe workplace. This obligation does not translate into employers guaranteeing that an employee will not contract COVID-19 at work, or any other illness for that matter. If an employer did not cause the illness to be in the workplace, it would be difficult to foresee a circumstance where an employer could be held liable for an employee bringing COVID-19 to work and infecting other employees. An employer does not have a positive obligation to prevent every possible risk of COVID-19 entering the workplace, nor is it reasonable to expect employers to guarantee safety from COVID-19. Employers do not have an obligation to identify employers do have an obligation to identify hazards in the workplace and take reasonable steps to manage and reduce those hazards. And then Alberta Federation of Labor, they came out with a statement saying Alberta's largest worker group, the Alberta Federation of Labor, has released a legal opinion stating that in almost all cases, mandatory workplace COVID vaccination policies are legal and would not be overturned by arbitrators or the courts. Keep in mind that this is all very new. They're reporting on what they believe to be true right now and what they're observing right now. What about operational risks? I was asked on October 13th, do we risk not being able to maintain operations in our schools if we do this? Like, what if there's a high number of staff that do say, well, I'm going on unpaid leave. I am not going to do vaccination, and I'm not going to give a rapid test. Well, we talked to our school principals, and talking to our schools, we believe, and of course they don't know for sure. They have no right to ask who's vaccinated, who's not, and they haven't done that. But out of our 17 schools, 15 feel that the majority of their staff appear to be vaccinated based on the discussions they hear around around the school. But there are 2 schools that we believe we could have significant operational challenges. That one letter that I referred to that had 23 names on it, 11 of them came from one staff. And so it's hard to know, will they actually, end up going on unpaid leave? And if they did, it could be challenging. But I think even beyond that, even if they didn't, our principals are telling us that right now they currently are having great challenges still in finding substitute teachers and casual EAs. And so that's another going to be a little bit more added pressure. I think we have to acknowledge that if we have that policy, that may reduce a little bit more of that pool of folks, right? So I was asked, do we risk losing students due to a vaccine status policy? We're not sure. All I can compare is the masking issue. When we didn't have masks at the start of the year, we lost a few kids because some parents were really concerned about the health and well-being of their children being exposed to COVID. Then when the government mandated masks, we lost a few kids because, some parents said, my child's mental health, it just doesn't go well if they have to wear a mask all day. And they had, the valid reasons for their family, why they just couldn't carry on. So we lost kids on both sides of the mask issue. I'm assuming that it could be true here as well on both sides of this issue. There's a bunch of practical considerations, and I'm not prepared to get into them tonight. If you want to move forward with the policy, we'll have to get into them. But who would it apply to? Just staff? What about division office staff? What about trustees? What about volunteers? What about contracted workers that come into our schools? What about parents? What about extracurricular activities, band concerts, and so on? How would we deal with those? What about enforcement? I've visited every single school since our October 13th meeting. I've talked with front office staff where I was able to. I've talked to principals. And the one common thread I'm hearing is, please don't put enforcement on us. We want to have positive relationships with our parents and with our staff. And we're really concerned about what the enforcement will do if our front office staff are needing to have to ask parents to supply their vaccination status. I mean, I'm sure all of you have been, seen this at a restaurant or somewhere else, and we all see the signs. Please don't abuse our staff. Our staff are tired, and I'm now representing them as their superintendent. They're at a low point. They're working hard, and they're letting me know, not that they're against or for, the vaccine policy, but they're saying they're worried about enforcement, and they're hoping that whatever we do around enforcement won't be all placed on their plates. What about the process for collecting vaccination status? Or what about the process for confirming bi-weekly negative rapid tests? That'll have to be figured out. We've been asked, what about antibody blood tests? People that have had COVID would need to make a decision on that, although I can tell you that both Brownlee and McLennan and Ross strongly urge us not to go there, because there's not enough science yet. There's not enough mainstream, as they put it, mainstream science to support the safety of that. And so both legal firms, they may differ in some areas, but on that one, they did not advise it. They advised us to take the advice of Alberta Health Services on that. We've checked with Alberta Health Services, and they said there's still not enough data to determine how many antibodies are required to be safe. And their advice is to not accept antibodies as a replacement for vaccination status. Timing, when would we start this? How much time would we give people? And then, of course, we got to look at medical and religious exemptions, how we'll deal with those. As far as other school divisions, Zone 4, we have 8 jurisdictions in Zone 4. We're one of 8. So far, 2 jurisdictions have made a decision. Wetaskiwin has said no for now. They are not going to have a vaccine status mandate. Battle River, that's the Camrose area, they've said yes. Wolf Creek, Chinook's Edge, Red Deer Public, they're all discussing it at their November 10th board meeting. Hard to say what will happen on those discussions. Clearview, that's the Stettler area. They're going to have they're going to talk about it on November 30th. And Red Deer Catholic, they didn't give a date. They said they've just chose to postpone their decision for right now until they can get more information to their answers to their questions. That's Zone 4. We have other rural neighbors close to us in the north. Black Gold School Division, Star Catholic, and Parkland. They've all said yes. They've all communicated to their staff and their communities that they will have a policy. or an AP. My concluding remarks before the board can move forward on the debate is, as I talk with people throughout our school division, I just want to reaffirm there are reasonable, very reasonable people with reasonable concerns and real fears on both sides of this issue. And regardless of which decision the board makes, it's a tough spot to be in. There'll be those that will be unhappy either way, and there'll be those that will be happy. So that's a given. I think as a board, keep in mind your mission. Your mission statement is to create powerful learning environments that support the learning and well-being of all students. And also keep in mind your legislated mandate under the School Education Act. It's Section 33, Part 1, letter D. And it states a board as a partner in education has the responsibility to ensure that each student enrolled in a school operated by the board and each staff member employed by the board is provided with a welcoming, caring, respectful, and safe learning environment that respects diversity and fosters a sense of belonging. And as always, and as I know you will, this discussion and your decision will have a good balance of truth and grace. So if there's any questions.
Okay, just a minute, Matt. Okay, well, hold that for a minute. It's 8:33. I'd just like to give everybody about a 5-minute break. But just before we go, just a quick outline. When we come back, Brad and Emma have given us a lot of information, so we'll do clarity questions on those two after. And then from that point, I'm not just giving what my perception, and I'm open for discussion on it. I see our next step as one of three things. A, that people have heard a lot of information tonight and don't feel comfortable to make a decision with what's been put in front of them or want more clarity. B, a motion comes forward from someone on the board to mandate, and we may have a debate from there. And then should that debate or that motion be successful, then the next step would be how we're going to implement that motion if that motion is successful. Just things to think about while we're taking a 10-minute break. I showed 10:34, so let's be back at 10:40, quarter to.
I think you meant 8:34, right, Daryl?
8:34. Yes.
I know I'm long-winded, but I'm not that long-winded.
Okay, see you in 10. Great, thank you. All right, Brad and Emma dropped a lot of information on all of us as we requested. My first question for everybody is, anybody have a question for clarity or a comment they want to make to Brad or Emma with what they said? Brad, oh, sorry, Penny, go ahead.
I was just wanting to know, because a lot of this is administratively driven through insurance and OH&S and things like that. Do you have a recommendation for the board from you, or is that something you're not wanting to speak to until after we debate?
Well, in this particular case, my role was to provide information to the board. And so I kind of would like to leave it at that. I mean, obviously, we all have our opinions. For right now, I would rather not influence that unless the board directs me to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Brad, I have a question on the one section you talked about when you're talking to the front staff and principals on enforcement, and they asked you please don't leave the enforcement to us. Was there any suggestions or comments or ideas of how to enforce it then?
Not really. You know, we've looked at some of this. We know that Chinook's Edge School Division, although they've not made a decision, it was Black Gold School Division who have made a decision. They've created a form where employees would upload their QR code directly to Human Resources. It wouldn't have to go to the principal. The principal wouldn't be involved. So that kind of is a level of kind of privacy and protection for employees. It would just go to our HR department. When it comes to, I think parents are the big concern, and we've noticed a number of different school divisions that have chosen not to make the policy apply to parents. And I think that's one of the reasons why. But no, they really don't have much solution there. They'd rather not have to check vaccination status, for example, coming into a Christmas concert. And right now, Alberta Health Services actually says you kind of have two choices. Like, think of restaurants, they have two choices. They can go 1/3 capacity, or they can go fill it up full with a vaccine passport. We would be in the same boat. And our school principals, and we said, hey, would you like to fill your gyms up on a Christmas concert if we went that direction? And they said, no, the time it would take to check ID and to check all those QR codes. And they said, no, thank you. We either will do our concerts virtually only this year again, or we prefer the 1/3 capacity that we're currently using, which is totally permissible and encouraged under Alberta Health Services right now.
So just a quick follow-up question to that then. So what are we currently doing for sporting events where we're saying only 1/3 capacity, but then a parent comes in and removes their mask? Are we doing anything about it, or are we just letting it go, or what are we currently doing?
I would say enforcement, that's an example of where enforcement is a challenge. You've got a volleyball coach who's giving up all their, a lot of their personal time, and they're on the bench and they're coaching, and they really don't have time to monitor that. And so we are depending on adults in the community to follow those requirements. Like those come from Alberta Health Services. We have no choice. And what's that risk if they choose not to? I suppose some jurisdictions right now aren't allowing any fans, for example, to come in to watch those sporting events. So I guess that's the motivation maybe for our parents to do the best they can to follow those rules, even if they don't like them. I'm sure they're doing it when they go into Costco or other places like that. So let's do it here for our students when you're watching them play volleyball or basketball or what have you. That's the motivation there. Are we policing it that tightly? I don't think so. But I would say the vast majority of parents are following the rules.
Okay. Charlene, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, thank you very much, Daryl. And thank you, Brad and Emma, for all of the information. So I had a question, which was a bit of a follow-up to that enforcement, and that was, Brad, when we're talking about QR codes being uploaded to HR, is that also the case for negative COVID tests?
We'd have to look into that. My understanding is that the pharmacy would give a specific form to the employee, and then that employee would then be able to take a picture of it with their phone and upload it. That could be possible, yes.
Like directly to HR.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And then I guess just maybe a comment that really follows up that last bit of discussion around parents and people. How's that enforcement? How well are we enforcing that? And I feel like it really comes back to this whole, even the situation that we're in, and that, we heard it in at least one of the presentations, and it's true. The provincial government has done a fantastic job of offloading their responsibility and costs to, 61 school boards, which has really pitted community against one another, which is really unfortunate, which detracts from other issues provincially. But I think that what it comes down to for me, when we think about this, for me, as we're considering this decision, is that we hear over and over and over and over in these emails that we're getting, that we are not experts, which we absolutely are not, and nor are any of the people, I think, that are writing the emails. It's difficult. We have a collective decision to make while parents are making individual decisions. But I think that what we need to be clear about, just from my perspective, in this discussion, as we do move forward, whatever it is that we choose to do, that it's not the responsibility only of 6 people in this school division to make those things work. We hear people talking about their individual rights, and that's really important. But we also need that support that we have to all respect the individual rights, choices, religions, beliefs, medical situations, and so on of others. And so as we move forward on this, when we make this choice, I think that what we need to be clear, whether that is an administrative procedure, whether that is, a policy, whatever choice we make, that it's a responsibility of everyone. And when we want choices, then we also have to take the responsibility that goes with ensuring that those choices, work for everyone. And so I'd like to hear from, some of the other board members, but the other concern that I have is that this is taking up an exorbitant amount of time, as it should. It's important, but what's happening with the rest of the decisions around the children's education? And so I just want us to really bear in mind that we have a responsibility to make. And I want to thank my colleagues for being the other 5 people who chose to actually step up, because we know that everybody's here because there weren't other people stepping up to make these decisions. So I want to thank you for that. And those are my thoughts as we are moving towards this decision. Shanice, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shanice. May?
I agree with Charlene with what she's been saying. It's hard to see that we're down the ladder on the governance area, and we have our government in Edmonton that can't make a decision, and our medical people can't make a decision, but they expect us to. So I just find it very ironic that this has to be in our sandbox.
Brad, I just want another follow-up question for you. When we've made the distinction between a staff member, which is a caretaker, a EA, a bus driver, a maintenance person, and the parent who's in watching their child at volleyball, basketball, whatever. But what level are we putting the parent volunteer at? The one that comes into a hot lunch program, they work with kids in a reading program that are not paid, but they're working within the school system. Where are we placing them as a parent coming in to work with watch the volleyball, or are we placing them, or the idea is more as an employee at that time?
So most of the school divisions that have made these policies have included volunteers as part of their policy. So it'll say something like this in their policy: this policy does not apply to parents unless they're acting in the role as a volunteer. And so you picture, a parent that comes to work in a kindergarten class to help out for the morning. I haven't seen a policy yet that doesn't ask them to that insists that they prove vaccination status as well.
Okay, Greg, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think part of the difference with that they're making is their interaction level with students and then with in the schools. If they're coming in to watch something, they're very much on the side, not involved with them, whereas a hot lunch or in the class for volunteers has that interaction with the students.
Okay, Heidi, you had your hand up. Mike, Heidi, your mic. Your mic. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to or follow up with what Greg was saying. With our volunteers in our school division, we require them to provide a criminal record check. We ask them to provide a child welfare check, and those are arguably just as private as the other things that we're requesting, and arguably just as important for safety.
Okay. Anybody else? Any questions for clarity of Brad or Emma on what they went through? Oh, sorry, Charlene.
That's okay. Sorry, I just wanted to, as a follow-up to what Heidi said, and I agree, because when I hear the thought that, we have a policy or an AP that's, pertains to our staff, and then not parents who are volunteering, the question that comes to mind is, then how does that make any sense if, people have that same level of engagement? So I just want to support what Heidi's saying there.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Questions for clarity for the two? Okay, I guess from my point of view, I think one of the things before we move any farther, I think I need to make sure that all of us feel comfortable that what the information you have in front of you today, that you're prepared or want to make a decision today. Yeah, and I think I feel compelled to ask the question: does anybody feel they need any more information to move forward from today? Are you everybody comfortable with what they have in their hand right now? Maybe I should go the other way. Anybody not feel comfortable? Jackie, I can't see you. You're muted, Jackie. You're muted.
I feel comfortable with my decision.
Okay. Okay. I just want, to me, it was just an important thing. Everybody, I think I need to go there. Okay. Then the next step from there is somebody prepared to make a motion regarding what's before us today. Okay. I don't see anybody stepping forward with a motion. So with no motion on the table, then our current position is status quo, where there's no mandate, and this is open for review at any time down the road. Having no motion on the table, I would ask for a motion to adjourn. You guys want to sit here for the night? We need to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn then.
Motion on the table to adjourn from Penny. All in favor? 2, 3, 4, 5. Unanimous. Okay, we're as is. But this is definitely a live topic, and probably will come back for review again. Our next board meeting is November 23rd, I believe. 23rd. Okay. Next board meeting is November 23rd, 9:30 in the morning. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening. Appreciate your time.